The rain poured mercilessly as retired Detective Jack Harmon knelt in the mud, his weathered hands trembling as he held the small, tattered teddy bear. Lightning illuminated the empty playground, revealing the pain etched across his face. His loyal German shepherd, Storm, whined softly beside him, pressing his wet nose against Jack's arm. "I know what they all think," Jack whispered, his voice barely audible above the thundering downpour. "That I'm just a broken old man chasing ghosts." He clutched the bear tighter, raindrops mixing with tears. "But you know better, don't you, boy?" Storm's eyes seemed to hold understanding beyond mere animal instinct. He barked once, sharp and determined, then tugged at Jack's sleeve with unexpected urgency. The dog's sudden behavior cut through Jack's moment of despair. Jack limped slightly as he followed Storm across the playground. The old knee injury, a parting gift from his final case, throbbed in the damp weather. The playground itself seemed haunted, not just by Emily's disappearance, but by memories of his own daughter, Lily, who would have been Emily's age if she had lived. Cancer had taken her 5 years ago, shortly before his retirement, leaving both him and his ex-wife, Margaret, adrift in separate oceans of grief. Storm led Jack to the edge of the playground where the woods began. The dog's sudden focus on something in the underbrush made Jack's detective instincts flare to life. Pushing aside wet branches, Jack discovered a small bracelet with butterfly charms, identical to the one Sarah Collins had described her daughter wearing the day she vanished. But there was something else, a small card with an unfamiliar symbol, a lighthouse surrounded by mist. What did Storm sense in that rain-soaked playground that no one else could? And why was a decorated K-9 handler like Jack Harmon, once the department's most respected detective, now standing alone in a storm, investigating a case no one else would touch? The answer would shake an entire town to its core and force Jack to confront the ghosts he'd been running from since the day he turned in his badge. 3 weeks earlier, Jack had been quietly living out his retirement in the small coastal town of Millhaven. After 27 years on the force, his days now consisted of long walks with Storm along the beach and occasional fishing trips. The nightmares from his final case had finally begun to fade. Jack's modest beachfront cottage had become his sanctuary, far from the violence and darkness he'd spent his career confronting. Storm, his former police K-9 partner who had retired alongside him, remained his constant companion. Their bond, forged through countless life-or-death situations, had only deepened during their retirement. That peaceful existence shattered on a Tuesday morning when his doorbell rang. Opening the door, Jack found Sarah Collins, a young mother whose eyes were red from crying. "Detective Harmon?" she asked hesitantly. "I know you're retired, but please, my daughter Emily is missing, and the police say there's nothing they can do." Jack's instinct was to turn her away. He had left that life behind for a reason. The scars, both physical and emotional, from his last case still haunted him. But Storm, who typically remained wary of strangers, immediately approached Sarah, resting his head against her trembling hand. "She's been gone for 2 days," Sarah continued, her voice breaking. "She's only 8. The police say she probably ran away after our argument, but Emily would never—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Jack recognized Sarah now. She was the new elementary school counselor who had moved to town 6 months ago, fleeing an abusive relationship according to local gossip. Her ex-husband, a former military contractor named Victor Collins, had been making threatening phone calls to her, though a restraining order kept him physically away. Jack had seen her around town with Emily, a bright-eyed girl with her mother's chestnut hair and an ever-present sketchbook. "When did you last see her?" Jack asked, already regretting the question that pulled him back into a world he'd sworn to leave behind. "Saturday evening. We had an argument about her spending time with her new friend, some older girl I've never met. I took away her phone." Sarah paused, guilt washing over her face. "When I went to apologize before bed, her window was open and she was gone." Jack's eyes narrowed. "This new friend? Did Emily mention a name? Only that everyone called her Mist, like the fog. I thought it was strange. Jack felt a cold sensation creep up his spine. Storm's ears perked up, as if the name itself carried some significance. Something about that name sparked a memory, a detail from an old case file that had never been resolved. Against his better judgment, Jack promised to look into Emily's disappearance. What began as a reluctant favor quickly transformed into a disturbing investigation. Emily Collins wasn't the first child to go missing in Millhaven. In the past year, 3 other children had disappeared, each case dismissed as a runaway situation. All of them had mentioned a mysterious new friend to their parents before vanishing. The local police department, once Jack's home for nearly 3 decades, had changed. Budget cuts had left it understaffed, and his former partner, now Lieutenant Mark Davidson, seemed oddly resistant to reopening the missing children cases. "They're runaways, Jack. Kids from troubled homes seeking attention," Mark insisted when Jack confronted him. "Don't turn this into something it's not." But Storm's behavior told Jack otherwise. The German Shepherd had been specially trained to track missing persons, with a success rate that had made them legendary in the department. And now, Storm was showing the same alertness he had displayed during their most important cases. Jack began retracing the children's last known movements. At each location, Storm exhibited the same unusual behavior, becoming agitated, circling specific areas, and always leading back toward the old lighthouse on the northern cliffs. The lighthouse had been abandoned for years, its ownership tied up in legal disputes between the town and a mysterious real estate corporation called Coastal Ventures. According to property records, Coastal Ventures was owned by one of Millhaven's most prominent citizens, Mayor Richard Crane. As Jack dug deeper, he encountered Eliza Montgomery, the town's elderly librarian, whose family had operated the lighthouse for generations before it was decommissioned. Her grandniece, Mia, had been one of the missing children, a fact she shared with trembling hands as she passed Jack a worn journal. "This belonged to my sister," Eliza whispered. She worked as the lighthouse keeper's assistant in the 1970s. The things she documented, children disappearing back then too, always near the lighthouse. Nobody believed her. They said she was mentally ill. She drowned herself in the bay a week after finishing this journal. The weathered pages told a disturbing story, a cycle of disappearances spanning decades, always following the same pattern, always dismissed by authorities. And at the center of each era's disappearances, a member of the Crane family. As Jack dug deeper, he discovered troubling connections. Mayor Crane had personally intervened in each missing child case, assuring parents that the police department was doing everything possible while simultaneously directing resources away from the investigations. When Jack attempted to access the police files on the missing children, he found them suspiciously incomplete. Evidence logs were missing, witness statements altered, and in Emily's case, the initial report had been changed to emphasize her argument with her mother. Each discovery pointed to a systematic cover-up that reached into the highest levels of local government. But why would anyone, let alone the mayor, want to hide the disappearance of children? The answer began to take shape when Jack and Storm investigated the lighthouse under cover of darkness. The supposedly abandoned building showed signs of recent activity, fresh tire tracks, a new lock on the basement door, and most disturbing of all, a small pink hair clip that Sarah identified as Emily's. Jack's confrontation with his former partner turned ugly when he presented his findings. "You're way out of line, Jack," Mark warned, his face flushing with anger. "You're not a cop anymore. Stop before you get yourself hurt." "Is that a threat?" Jack asked quietly. Mark's expression shifted, momentarily revealing something Jack had never seen in his former partner: fear. "Just drop it, Jack. For your own good." As Jack turned to leave, he noticed a framed photograph on Mark's desk that hadn't been there during his previous visit. Mark shaking hands with Mayor Crane at what appeared to be a private yacht club. In the background, partially obscured but unmistakable, was a symbol Jack had seen before, the lighthouse surrounded by mist, identical to the card he had found at the playground. That night, as Jack reviewed his notes, he received an unexpected visitor, Dr. Rebecca Chen, the county medical examiner and Jack's former colleague. Her hands shook as she handed him a sealed envelope. "I found something during Mia Montgomery's autopsy last month," she whispered. "The department said she drowned accidentally, but there were injection marks and trace amounts of a sedative in her system. When I filed my report, it disappeared. The next day, my son started receiving threatening text messages." Inside the envelope was a tissue sample and a photograph showing a small tattoo behind Mia's ear, the same lighthouse symbol. Rebecca's revelation confirmed Jack's worst fears. This wasn't just about missing children. Some had already returned to Millhaven as corpses. That night, Jack's cottage was broken into. Nothing was taken, but the message was clear. Someone wanted him to stop investigating. What they hadn't counted on was Storm. The German Shepherd had detected the intruders before they could reach Jack's bedroom and chased them off the property. One of the intruders dropped something in their hasty retreat, a business card for Coastal Ventures with Mayor Crane's personal number handwritten on the back. The connection was now undeniable, but Jack still didn't understand why the mayor would risk everything to abduct children. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when Storm led Jack to a hidden cove near the lighthouse. There, partially concealed by rocks and vegetation, was a small boat dock. Fresh footprints led from the dock to the lighthouse, and among them were the distinct impressions of small children's shoes. Jack realized with growing horror what was happening: child trafficking. The lighthouse wasn't just a temporary holding location, it was a transfer point. Children weren't running away, they were being lured away by someone they trusted and then smuggled out by sea. Armed with this evidence, Jack knew going to the local police was pointless. Instead, he contacted an FBI agent he'd worked with years ago, sending her everything he'd discovered and arranging to meet at a diner outside of town. As Jack was leaving the cove, a young woman stepped from the shadows, slender, pale, with haunting eyes that seemed too old for her teenage face. Before Jack could react, she spoke. "You're looking for Mist," she said, her voice hollow. "That's what they called me before I escaped. My real name is Vanessa Crane. The mayor's daughter, presumed dead for 3 years after a boating accident, was very much alive and had been the first victim of her father's horrific operation. She'd managed to escape during a transfer, but had been living off the grid, afraid to come forward. The trauma of her captivity had left her damaged, but she'd been secretly helping other victims escape whenever possible. I've been watching you," Vanessa admitted. "The children trust me. I help them when I can, but there are too many guards. Tomorrow night they're moving the biggest group yet, including your Emily." But word of Jack's investigation had spread too far. As he and Storm approached the diner, Jack noticed a black SUV with tinted windows parked nearby. His instincts screaming danger, he turned to leave, but it was too late. Men in dark clothing emerged from the vehicle, and Jack found himself surrounded. "Detective Harmon!" Mayor Crane stepped out from the SUV, his politician's smile firmly in place. "I think it's time we had a chat about your retirement activities." Jack assessed his options. He was outnumbered, and the mayor's men were almost certainly armed. His hand moved slowly toward his phone, but one of the men shook his head. "I wouldn't," the man warned. "Now why don't you and your dog come with us for a friendly conversation?" In that moment, Storm's training proved invaluable. Without any visible signal from Jack, the German Shepherd understood they were in danger. With a ferocious growl, Storm lunged at the nearest man, creating the distraction Jack needed. In the ensuing chaos, Jack managed to evade capture, but not without cost. A bullet grazed his leg as he and Storm escaped into the nearby woods. Injured and cut off from help, Jack realized this was bigger than he had initially thought. The mayor's willingness to attempt a public abduction suggested desperation. Something was happening soon, perhaps another transfer of children. As Jack limped through the forest, Storm suddenly tensed, growling softly at the approaching footsteps. Jack reached for the service weapon he no longer carried, cursing his lack of preparation. But instead of one of Crane's men, it was Vanessa who emerged from the trees, accompanied by Officer Trent Wilson, the department's newest recruit. "Wilson's on our side," Vanessa explained quickly. "He's been gathering evidence against Crane for months. His little sister was one of the first victims." Wilson's young face was grim as he helped Jack to his feet. "The department's compromised, sir. Lieutenant Davidson just issued a BOLO for you, armed and dangerous, allegedly suffering from dementia and paranoid delusions. They're saying you abducted Emily Collins." The frame-up was already in motion. With his reputation destroyed and a manhunt underway, Jack would have no credibility even if he survived the night. His only hope now was to find the children before they disappeared forever. Jack and Storm made their way to the one person they could still trust, Sarah Collins. With her help, Jack's wounds were tended to, and he was able to establish contact with his FBI connection. The agent confirmed what Jack had suspected. A major child trafficking operation had been operating along the coast for years, with local officials paid to look the other way. The most disturbing news was that a major transfer was indeed scheduled for that night. Emily and the other missing children would be moved offshore to a larger vessel and taken out of the country. Once that happened, the chances of recovery would be almost zero. With the FBI still hours away and local law enforcement compromised, Jack faced an impossible choice: wait for proper backup and risk losing the children forever, or attempt a rescue with only Storm at his side. For Jack, it wasn't really a choice at all. Sarah insisted on coming despite Jack's protests. "She's my daughter," she said, checking the magazine of a 9mm pistol that Jack hadn't realized she owned. "Victor wasn't the only one with military experience in our marriage. I was an MP before Emily was born." Officer Wilson arrived with more shocking news. Mark Davidson had been found dead in his office, an apparent suicide with a typed confession claiming sole responsibility for the trafficking operation. Jack knew immediately it was Crane's attempt to close ranks and create a scapegoat. "Crane's accelerated the timetable," Vanessa informed them. "They're moving the children tonight, right now. There's something you don't know, Jack. This isn't just trafficking. Some of the children are never sold. They're used for something else at the lighthouse, something my father calls the ritual. It happens during specific astronomical alignments, and there's one tonight." The mention of ritual activity connected the final dots in Jack's mind. The journal Eliza had shared contained references to occult gatherings dating back centuries. Millhaven's founding families, the Cranes prominent among them, had apparently been engaged in dark practices involving child sacrifices, believing it granted them power, wealth, and longevity. It sounded impossible, the stuff of horror movies rather than real criminal investigation. Yet the evidence was mounting that Mayor Crane believed in these rituals enough to risk everything to continue them. The storm that had been threatening all day finally broke as Jack and Storm approached the lighthouse. Rain lashed against them, and lightning illuminated the imposing structure against the night sky. The weather provided natural cover, masking the sound of their approach. Through the lighthouse's salt-crusted windows, Jack could see movement, armed guards patrolling the ground floor. Using Storm's extraordinary senses, they identified a blind spot in the security and made their way to the basement entrance. Sarah positioned herself as lookout while Officer Wilson covered the rear exit. Vanessa, knowing the interior layout from her time in captivity, guided Jack and Storm toward the hidden entrance she had used to escape 3 years earlier. A narrow maintenance tunnel that ran beneath the lighthouse, originally built as an emergency exit for lighthouse keepers during severe storms. As they navigated the dark, damp passage, Jack noticed strange markings etched into the tunnel walls. ancient symbols that matched some he had seen in Eliza's sister's journal. The air grew thick with an odd, sweet-smelling incense that made Jack's head swim momentarily. Storm growled softly, sensing the wrongness permeating the place. "They'll be in the ritual chamber," Vanessa whispered, her voice tight with fear. "It's below the main level, carved into the rock beneath the lighthouse. My father believes the location sits on a convergence point of mystical energy." Her voice cracked. "I was supposed to be a sacrifice once, but I wasn't pure enough after what they had done to me. That's the only reason I'm alive." The tunnel suddenly opened into a larger underground chamber that appeared much older than the lighthouse itself. Rough-hewn stone walls covered in the same symbols from the tunnel, illuminated by flickering torchlight. Jack could hear chanting from somewhere deeper in the complex, and Storm's hackles raised, sensing the presence of the missing children nearby. The lock was no match for the tools Jack had brought, and soon they were inside. The basement had been converted into a holding area, with several small rooms and a central area where guards played cards, unaware of the intrusion. Storm's training allowed him to move silently, leading Jack through the shadows. When they reached the cells, Jack's heart sank. 5 children, including Emily, were huddled in separate rooms, their faces etched with fear and exhaustion. "Mr. Harmon," Emily whispered in disbelief when Jack appeared at her door. "Mom said you'd find me." "We need to be very quiet," Jack instructed as he freed each child. "My friend Storm is going to lead us out." But their escape was discovered too soon. Shouts and footsteps thundered above them as Jack guided the children toward an old maintenance tunnel he had spotted on his previous visit. Storm took point, his acute senses alert for danger. When 2 guards appeared in their path, Storm launched into action, taking down one while Jack engaged the other. The children watched in awe as the retired detective and his K-9 partner worked in perfect synchronization, their years of training evident in every movement. Just as they reached the tunnel entrance, Mayor Crane himself appeared, a gun trained on Jack. He was dressed in an elaborate ceremonial robe adorned with the lighthouse symbol, his eyes wild with fanatical purpose. "I underestimated you, Harmon," he said, his political mask gone. "A mistake I won't repeat." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. As the mayor's finger tightened on the trigger, Storm leapt through the air with a ferocious growl. The gun discharged, the bullet missing Jack by inches as Storm collided with the mayor, sending both of them crashing to the ground. Jack didn't hesitate. He secured the mayor, used zip ties to bind his hands, and guided the children into the tunnel. Storm limped slightly from the confrontation, but remained vigilant, leading them through the darkness toward safety. Behind them, the mayor laughed maniacally despite his restraints. "You have no idea what you've interfered with, Harmon. The ritual has sustained our family for generations. The sacrifices are necessary. Without them, everything collapses." As if in response to his words, the ancient tunnel began to shake. Dust and small stones rained down as the structure, weakened by age and the pounding storm above, started to collapse around them. Jack hurried the children forward, with Storm guiding them through the increasingly treacherous passage. When they emerged from the tunnel, they found Sarah engaged in a firefight with the remaining guards. Officer Wilson was down, wounded but alive, while Vanessa was helping the first freed children into a waiting boat. Lightning struck the lighthouse as they watched, igniting a fire that quickly spread throughout the ancient structure. The flames revealed dozens of robed figures fleeing into the night, Millhaven's elite, caught in their dark worship. They emerged from the tunnel just as FBI vehicles swarmed the lighthouse grounds. Agent Diana Chen, Jack's old colleague, coordinated the operation that would ultimately dismantle one of the largest child trafficking rings on the East Coast. The aftermath brought revelations that stunned the small town. Mayor Crane's trafficking operation had been running for over a decade, protected by bribes and threats. Lieutenant Davidson and several other officers were arrested for their roles in the cover-up, while Sarah Collins tearfully reunited with her daughter. For Jack, the case brought a different kind of closure. The nightmares that had driven him into retirement, the unsolved disappearance of a young girl much like Emily, finally found resolution. That case, it turned out, had been one of Mayor Crane's earliest victims. 2 months later, as summer returned to Millhaven, Jack sat on his porch watching Storm chase seagulls along the beach. His leg had healed, and the town had a new mayor who had awarded Storm a ceremonial key to the city for his heroism. Sarah and Emily Collins visited regularly, often bringing treats for Storm. Emily, recovering well from her ordeal, had developed a special bond with the German shepherd who had helped save her life. "Do you ever miss it?" Sarah asked one evening as they watched Emily playing fetch with Storm. "Being a detective?" Jack considered the question carefully. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But Storm and I have a new purpose now." That new purpose had taken shape in the form of a specialized training program Jack had established. Using his experience and Storm's exceptional abilities, they were teaching local K-9 units to better recognize signs of trafficking and locate missing children. The nightmares had stopped, replaced by the satisfaction of knowing that his retirement years would not be spent fishing, but continuing the work that had defined his life, only now on his own terms, with Storm always by his side. Eliza Montgomery had donated her family's journals and records to Jack's new foundation, providing historical context to the generations-long conspiracy that had plagued Millhaven. The documents revealed that the Crane family's occult practices dated back to the town's founding in the 1700s, with each generation continuing the tradition out of superstition, greed, and genuine belief in dark powers. Vanessa Crane, having testified against her father and the other cult members, was slowly rebuilding her life under a new identity. She occasionally assisted with Jack's training programs, her first-hand experience proving invaluable in teaching others to recognize the signs of trafficking. Officer Wilson recovered from his wounds and became the town's new police chief, committed to rebuilding the department's integrity and working closely with Jack's foundation to prevent such horrors from ever happening again. As if sensing Jack's thoughts, Storm abandoned his game with Emily and returned to the porch, resting his head on Jack's knee. Jack scratched behind his ears, their silent communication as clear as any spoken words. "That's right, boy," Jack murmured. "We're not done yet." Storm's tail wagged in agreement, his intelligent eyes fixed on his partner. The bond between them, forged in fire, tested in storms, remained unbreakable. Together, they had saved 5 children from a fate worse than death, brought down a trafficking ring, and found the purpose that had eluded Jack in his retirement. The sun set over Millhaven Beach, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. For the first time in years, Jack Harmon felt completely at peace, with his loyal K-9 partner at his side, and the knowledge that sometimes the most important storms are the ones we walk through together. In the distance, the ruins of the lighthouse stood as a silent reminder of the darkness they had faced and overcome. But as Emily's laughter rang out across the beach, Jack knew with certainty that light had finally returned to Millhaven. This brings us to the end of this story. Thank you for watching till the end. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, don't hesitate to like the video and share it with your friends too. Subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell for more fascinating stories. Have a nice day.